Hi guys, my name is Anna, you're watching simcue, and without further ado, let's get into this video. So right off the bat, we are jumping into the basement, getting down all of the rooms, raising all of the platforms to actually get this to match the outside as well. In the first video for this bathhouse, we finished all of the exterior, so today we're working on the interior, all of the rooms, all of the furnishing, and eventually all of the final touches to finish this bathhouse. And in general, we will slowly be working our way up, so here we are starting in the boiler room. This is where Chihiro meets Kamaji for the first time. From the garden on the ground level, Haku tells her to go down to the boiler room and ask Kamaji for a job. She then runs down all of these very questionable stairs and enters through this hallway that we are currently working on. The hallway is quite simple. It's just made up of a lot of pipes, so I added those in, sized some of them up and rotated them with the tool mod. I also went ahead and added some steamers. These are technically pool effects from Get Together. I will have to test them in live mode, but hopefully they work and we just get a very steamy room. From here we're going to move on to the actual boiler room, where I'm going to try out some different things to see if I can find some drawers that work, because all of the walls are just covered in drawers where it seems like Kamaji is keeping all of his ingredients, but I couldn't really find drawers that were very tileable. So instead I compromised and went in with these cabinets from Horse Ranch, because then I could at least fill up like the entire wall, which I really liked. And then here I added a short half wall and all of these mice holes from City Living and a small base game decorative piece to make it a little bit nicer. And if you've watched the film, you of course know that this is because Kamaji is in charge of all of these small black spirits that carry the coal to the boiler. So it's another thing that I have to test, but technically in live mode you should then in The Sims see just a lot of mice running around on the floor, and I thought that that was kind of a fun detail. For the actual boiler, I just sized up the cupcake machine. It finally came in handy, and then added even more pipes. So in front of the boiler, basically at the center of this room, we have Kamaji's seat, and I created that using some more cabinets from Horse Ranch, which I lowered with the tool mod because he's sort of elevated above the ground. Next to it we have these sized up olive jars because he has these colored jars that seem to be filled with ingredients next to him, and these were like the best that I could find, and I think it's a little bit funny knowing that it's olive jars, but I think it works. We also added his little purple pillow and a gear that I found in the debug menu from high school years, which I thought was kind of a cool detail. His teapot that he drinks a lot of water or tea from, and then a little bowl I think from Eco Lifestyle, where I kind of imagined that he was grinding all of the ingredients before throwing them into the boiler. Next to it I placed this coffee table because it is quite common to have these like lower laying tables and then just sit at pillows. So we're adding these here, and then we are actually already moving on to the baths. So we are jumping ahead to the ground floor, and that is because Kamaji's boiler room actually takes up both basement floors. And also, as I've already mentioned, because I decided to not decorate any other parts than what we actually see in the film for the basement. The rest is fully decorated and furnished. So working on the baths, I decided to go in with jacuzzis so that they were actually functional, and I also found that in the film the baths are quite big because the spirits are quite big. And so I think this was also when I realized that actually the bathhouse wasn't as big as I imagined working on the exterior, because adding in this room for the baths actually didn't leave that much space surrounding it, but it was very important for me that this like main room from the film took up as much space as needed, and then I sort of had to work around it for everything else. Now to ensure that this video doesn't get too long, certain parts are cut out, and here you also saw me skip ahead because me finding the furniture that best matched the ones from the film just wasn't very interesting. But from the different shots we see of the bath, it's very clear that it's just filled up with buckets. I imagine that the idea is that the servants are sort of like throwing water on top of the spirits to wash them. So we have buckets from Cottage Living, and then these footstools with buckets from Snowy Escape. So the room for the baths have this gorgeous wallpaper with these giant trees around it. And I tried out some different things trying to mimic that, but nothing really worked. So I tried with the wisteria from Cottage Living, but I didn't like that it was actually like popping out of the wall. And then I also tried with these decal clouds and cracks from vampires, which I'd seen in another video, but I really didn't like that the decals became very glitchy. sketchy. So I took another look around the catalog and eventually found this tree from Growing Together, which I actually quite like. So in the film, this is definitely a completely different type of tree, and it also has green leaves, but I just found that this was the one that looked the nicest and the least like it belonged in a children's room. So I sized them up and down with the tool mod to create some variation, and I actually do think it turns out quite nice. So from here we're moving on to the actual entrance of the bathhouse, and I think we see this the best when they are welcoming the river spirit that is very polluted and dirty. I think they call it a stink spirit to begin with, and because it's moving so slow, we actually get a pretty clear shot of this entrance. So I tried to replicate that to the best of my ability, paying attention to all of the small details, which is why we are adding these archways, because I noticed that it wasn't actually just one big room. So we have this red wallpaper. I decided to go in with one that already had wooden details on it because we see that in the film, but I didn't really like that they were at the bottom, and I especially didn't like how it looked with the platform. So instead I came up with this idea to use these roof pieces from Cottage Living, raise them up all of them, because there was a weird visual glitch, and then have them become these wooden beams, which I did quite like. And it turned out to be a thing that would come back to bite me multiple times, because a lot of the walls have these wooden beams. They are quite common in old traditional Japanese homes, but my problem was that a lot of the wallpapers that came with nice wooden details didn't really work with the platform, so there was just a lot of times that I had to go in and sort of custom make the walls. So that's also what we're doing here on the other side of the wall, where we have a little frogman sitting and giving out like tokens to the servants so that they can send that down to the boiler room. But I decided not to show you that much of it because I did change it later, unfortunately off camera. Anyway, we've now moved on to the first floor, and I just want to quickly say that I accidentally started recording in game. This is definitely a mistake, and the yellow border will disappear eventually. So a big part of the first floor is actually also part of this room with the baths, because it exceeds actually 2 floors, so we will also be working on it for the second floor. But here on the first floor we have these overhangs, balconies. I don't really know what to call these walkways, but they are made up of wooden columns and also a wooden fence. And then we have what I would call an actual balcony that looks just a little bit nicer than the rest and has this black fence instead. From here we will be moving on to the second floor, and then we will come back to do all of the rooms here on the first floor a little bit later. So for the second floor we also have these walkways in each side. This is also where we have the bridge that Chihiro and Lin crosses, and this definitely looks more expensive. It is more heavily detailed, more intricate all over, and this is in general something that I found quite interesting working on the bathhouse, both with the exterior and the interior, that the lower the level, the lower the status, and the higher up we go, the nicer the bathhouse is. It's more heavily decorated, it's using more expensive materials, there are just a lot more details in general, and I just thought that that was a very nice touch. So here we're starting to see it all come together with the walkways, with the bridge. This is using the red fence. If I remember correctly, red is seen as more of a royal color, so it makes sense that we see more red as we go up the bathhouse. And the way I created the bridge to mimic a bit of the roundness the actual bridge has was to just raise the platforms every other tile. Doing so unfortunately makes the fence look kind of weird, so that's why I went in and added this piece from Get Famous of all packs that could kind of cover up the edges. The reason why I did it like that was because it was very important for me that the interior bridge was fully functional. What I did with the exterior, which I actually noticed that I didn't really show in the video, but the exterior is a debug bridge, and then I just placed portals so your sim will just like teleport from one side to another. But for the interior, because it's also on such a smaller scale, I thought that this bridge was alright. It's not the best looking, but it's the best that we can really pull off, and I would much rather have them actually being able to cross the bridge. So we're now working on the second floor balcony. I think I double checked that yes, there is a balcony on both floors. This is again a bit more detailed, a bit nicer looking, and this was also when I eventually realized that actually the bridge is to the other side, like it's more so at the back of the bathhouse, so in a short moment we will be moving the bridge. And And I definitely also mentioned this in the first video, but this is just the fun part of working with a film, trying to replicate something that we see in another format and slowly realizing screenshot from screenshot that actually it looks a little bit different than what you thought originally. But before moving the bridge, I can see that we are working on some spandrels and some awnings because there is this interior roof. I think again, just another detail to really sell this as a higher status area. But then we will actually get into moving the bridge, fixing the bridge, and fixing anything that might have been destroyed or need to be changed just because of this small minor thing. I don't really think it shows because this is like 8 times speed. But this was definitely when the game was starting to struggle a little bit with these kind of changes. So it wasn't too much of a problem when I was just adding wallpaper or adding furniture, but when changing anything major like walls or roofs, at the very end, I think it took it like a solid second to actually visually make the change. So I've already mentioned it, but this is a heavy build. I don't think it's going to run very well on a small spec computer because even my computer is still struggling a little bit with loading this lot, but I just think it's so worth it because I absolutely love this build. So you just saw me add even more details, and then just like with the first floor, we will be back to actually decorate these surrounding rooms. But we've now jumped into the servants' quarters. So this is where Chihiro is staying while she's at the bathhouse together with Lin and all of the other more human-looking servants. From my understanding, the frogmen live in the basement of the bathhouse, and then the more human-looking servants live at like the ground floor-ish. This is at least where we're placing them in this bathhouse, because we do have a scene where Chihiro is sort of looking out over the water, standing on one of the balconies / bump outs, and the one that I believe she's standing on matches the one that I have actually placed here on this level. Unfortunately, these rooms are not quite as wide as I would have liked them. They're only 3 tiles wide, and I would have very much liked them to be 4 tiles wide, but as I've already mentioned, the actual baths just took up a lot more space than I had anticipated. So what I did instead was just utilize some more rooms next to one another so that we could fill in a bit more of this space. I did add 3 beds, which I lowered with the tool mod. I am a bit unsure of whether or not they work. I will play test it. I hope that it works. I feel like I've seen other people do it, but I am a little bit unsure. But either way, I might keep it this way because it's not super important for me that this part specifically is very playable. You don't really need this area. It's more like nice because it's part of the film. And then of course, if you actually wanted to use it, you could just place the bed at the regular level and it should work. So it's not too much of an issue for me. But the reason why I would have liked it to be 4 tiles wide is because it has all of these closets on the entire back wall. This is another thing that is very common in traditional Japanese homes, and it's because they keep the futons there. A futon is a type of bed, which was what I was trying to mimic by lowering the bed and by also placing all of the rugs with pillows around the place. And we do actually get to see the servant quarters both when they are sleeping and they have all of the futons out and it seems a little bit chaotic, but also later when all the futons are packed away in the closets and they just have like a table and pillows out. So I do like how the servant quarters turned out. I just think with a little bit more space we could have created something that looked a little bit more like what we actually have in the film. But we've now moved on to what I think in the film is actually a banquet hall, but in the game, it is very small and far too small to be really anything. So I just decided to add a kotatsu with a pot in the middle because then your sim should be able to get some food. And otherwise, this room is just inspired by the colors of this banquet hall that we see in the film when Chihiro is asked to clean. In the scene, we see her running back and forth with a cloth down on the floor, so like her head downwards, together with some other servants. So to the right of the entrance, I made this little changing room. By now, I had covered all of the rooms that we see in the film for this floor, and I realized for this to actually be playable, it probably needed a few more items. I am going to upload this as an onsen bathhouse, and so I thought it was nice to actually have some proper showers. downstairs, and I also thought that the Sims probably needed some changing rooms, so that is what we have here. And overall, I do think the bathhouse turns out to be a nice mix of what we see in the film and actual items for playing that are functional and that your Sims can interact with. So the only issue I really had with this room was that the hallway that actually leads to the outside is at a lower level, so the platforms didn't really add up. And I just personally don't really like having the door like right on the edge of the platform, so it almost seems to be floating. So this little shower room does have like 2 sets of platforms so that it matches from the entrance and down to this hallway. And for this little hallway space, I didn't really do all that much. I just found some furniture, threw it in there, and I think you will in general see that the rooms that aren't inspired by the films aren't as heavily decorated. And it's really because, as I've already mentioned, this is a heavy enough build that there's no reason for me to add even more to it. So of course I wanted all of the rooms to look very nice, but I also found that it wasn't very necessary to like overly decorate them and just keep on adding items for the sake of adding items. So we've now moved on to the first floor, where most of the rooms are also only 3 tiles wide. Here I decided to add a sauna, and it is by no means the best place for a sauna. There are some windows so that it looks nice from the outside. But again, I just wanted to add more items that you could actually interact with if you come and play here. So I still thought it could be kind of nice to add a sauna, because I also didn't really know what I wanted to do with all of these rooms. I actually realized that I had quite a lot of rooms that don't really follow anything we see in the film. And I felt like the alternative was to just turn them into a lot of rooms with like beds and more kotatsu like this one, but that also just seemed like such a waste because you wouldn't really need it. So I tried out some different things. So this is the second but also last room that just has a kotatsu. I didn't want to add too many because I don't think that other Sims are actually going to use them. I only think it's if your Sim is hungry, then you could use them, but I do think it looks kind of nice. From here we are moving into a private room with 2 beds. I decided to add this both in case the beds in the servants' room wasn't actually functional. I thought it would be nice to actually have functional beds. And then I also decided to create this room in case you want to use this as a custom venue, so that you had an example of what a bedroom could look like, and then you could change like the sauna room, also the room that you just saw with the kotatsu, to more so just look like this one. Because I thought it could be nice to create some different options of how you can play with this lot, and I definitely think a custom venue could be another great way to use this lot. And there are plenty of onsens that have these kind of guest rooms. It is quite a common thing, I think, both for Japanese but also for tourists, to go to an onsen, to stay for a couple days and just enjoy the hot springs. We are now back at the second floor, which we can easily recognize by the red spandrels, and here I decided to do a little yoga room. So I do actually think that you could also use the lot as a spa if you wanted to. Again, I just wanted to add as much functionality to this bathhouse instead of just repeating the same kind of rooms over and over. And I also thought that if you actually want to turn it into a custom venue, it would be nice to have some more activities for Sims to do, so that you can have some of the guests doing yoga. There's also going to be a massage room in just a moment, and then you could have other people coming in and pretend to be the servants. While I like the challenge of creating these replicas of what we see in real life or in films, it's also very important for me that they are actually playable. To me, that is an important part of building in Sims 4. Otherwise, I could probably be using some sort of architectural program or learn a 3D program. So I do like to also add a lot of playability and a lot of different ways to use the lots, which is also why I added these 2 chessboards, because maybe after soaking in the hot springs, your Sim wants to come and play some chess and work on their logic skills. Who knows? For this video, I actually did look up what you would normally do at an onsen, and of course the main thing is using the hot springs. But it was also in general just a place to go and relax, and I just had this image in my head of like elderly people playing chess, so that is also why we added the chess games. I just thought it was kind of fun. And we've now moved on to the massage room, because there were just so many rooms to be furnished, and we already had the sauna and the yoga studio. So I basically just went and looked in the catalog for what else came with Spa Day. And I hadn't really thought about it prior to this, but I actually think that Spa Day is one of the packs that probably came with the most like new activities added. So it was very nice to just be able to go through that and basically just for every room add add a new like spa day activity. From here we have a little bit of a lounge area. That is in general how I decorated the hallway space that we have. Again, keeping it kind of sparse so that we don't add too many items. And then we will finally be moving up to the 4th floor, the upper floor of this bathhouse, Yubaba's office. In the first video, I mentioned that I wasn't quite finished with the interior, but it was like no biggie. I was just missing a little bit. And I was very optimistic when I said that, because I very quickly realized that I was not just missing a little bit. In my mind, I was only missing all of the rooms you just saw me decorate. So like the sauna, the yoga studio, the massage room, also the private bedroom, like those rooms. And I had just completely forgotten that I was also missing Yubaba's office, which is just a very heavily decorated area. And it took so long. And I'd also completely forgotten that the finishing touches always take way longer than I might anticipate. So what was supposed to just be, you know, a little quick thing of just finishing the last bits of the interior, I think added another like 8 hours, which I just hadn't accounted for when I decided to post the first part and get this done by Saturday. But I mean, here we are, we made it. It was just a little bit more stressful than I had planned for it to be, but I'm still very happy that we finished it. So considering how much of this we actually see in the film, because we do see multiple rooms, because Yubaba is basically like dragging Chihiro around all of these heavily decorated hallways, and I just didn't have a space for all of that. So we only have 2 hallways. The one that she enters, which is the one that we are currently working on, that technically has 2 red doors at the end, but that didn't really fit, so we only have 1 door in this version. And then we have what I like to call the blue hallway that we will be working on in a little bit. So this first hallway is actually quite dark. We will be deleting the overhead light in a moment. And then it has this nice tiled flooring, and then just very big like vases, jars. I actually don't really know what you would call them when they are at that side. Like they're basically almost like floor to ceiling. And I didn't really have anything that looked that good sized up. You can probably see that I tried out a couple of different ones. So this one from City Living we will use multiple times because it was the one that looked the best quality-wise when sized up. So this is the blue hallway. This is the one that she enters through the first part. And when all of these like doors open, we can just see so many rooms, and I couldn't replicate all of them because there's simply just not space for it. But this blue hallway has a lot of columns and wooden details on the walls, and also I'm assuming just a nice wallpaper, but we don't really have a blue wallpaper that matched in any way. So you will see me later go in with some decals from Life and Death to add some more detail to this hallway. But I think the footage in itself is pretty easy to follow. So even though you didn't really see much of it, I would instead like to comment on how I created the elevator, because in the beginning I actually did try out with the elevators we have from City Living. I thought they kind of worked like the portals we have from Realm of Magic, in the sense that there would be an entrance elevator and an exit elevator, and then they would work just like your sim teleporting. But that is apparently not how they work, and I think I technically knew, but I was still a little bit surprised when it gave me the red prompt of like, can only place 1 elevator on a lot. So instead I actually did end up using the portals from Realm of Magic so that your sim will just go into one room and then exit here on the 4th floor. So we've now actually moved on to Yubaba's office. I actually really like this office. I thought in the beginning that it was going to be a lot more cluttered, but it actually is kind of clean. And I was very happy that the proportions didn't feel too off, even though what you've probably noticed by now is that we do have this weird situations of having like rooms within rooms, and that is because from the outside there are just so many windows, but in Yubaba's office we actually only really have 2 sets of windows. So trying my best to create the outside and the inside to look as close to the film as possible, I just found that this room on room situation was what worked the best. We see Yubaba's office multiple times throughout the film. In the beginning when Chihiro comes to ask for a job, and then much later on when Chihiro follows Haku into her office. after Haku has stolen a golden seal from Seneba, Yubaba's sister. And this is definitely when we get the best view of the office, because this happens at broad daylight and Chihiro is actually running from one end to the other end. So we see both the side with her desk and then also the side with the fireplace. And in general, what you might have noticed is that Yubaba's area, both her office and all of the hallways, also later when we do the bathroom, is just very grand. It's very over the top, it's heavily decorated, and it looks very different from the rest of the bathhouse. And this is of course fully on a purpose, and what Miyazaki really wanted to showcase with this was how Western consumerism was also becoming more common to see in Japan. So basically the lower levels of the bathhouse more follow a traditional Japanese style, and then the upper floors, especially the floor with Yubaba's office, is much more inspired by a Western style. And this is definitely part of why the film is so highly acclaimed, because it's technically a film for children, but it just comments on so many other issues. So Yubaba, the villain, is portrayed as more greedy and clearly cares about materialistic things. And there's just a general theme of greed. We also see it with the workers that are very obsessed over the gold, and we also see it with a no-face that just keeps on eating and eating and eating, eventually also eating some of the workers. And it becomes very clear that whatever he eats, it's never enough, and eventually it actually makes him really sick. The film also comments on human pollution with the river god that arrives very dirty, polluted, and it doesn't become clean until Chihiro unclogs it and just removes a lot of dirt and a lot of human items, including a bicycle. And reading a bit more about the film, I also learned that Haku, who is actually another river spirit, Chihiro figures this out at the very end. She's riding on his back as a dragon, and then says that she remembers him because she fell into this river as a child, and this is what gives him his memories back. But what it symbolizes is that this was an actual river that was basically just removed by humans because they wanted to utilize the land. And essentially that's why he has forgotten who he is, because his river was destroyed by humans. So there's really just a lot more going on than what you might think to begin with. I think it is a great film and can definitely be watched without knowledge about all of this, but it's also a film that I just take so much interest in because it's very clear that so much more went into it than just creating a good film. Anyway, while I've been yapping, we have finished up Yubaba's office and are currently working on a bathroom. In the film, I think this bathroom is directly connected to Yubaba's office, but that just simply wasn't an option. So instead, this is next to the entrance corridor. But the bathroom is definitely inspired by the two references that I had, so I could copy the floor. We also have the blue wallpaper, and we do have these, which I quite like, vase lamps that Yubaba have in multiple areas, including the bathroom. And then for the rest of it, I was just improvising. I found these mirrors from Vintage Glamour, a pack I haven't used in a long time. And then these sinks from Realm of Magic, which I actually really like. We also have a sink from Get Famous that is also very over the top, but I just feel like what says materialistic more than having a freaking peacock sink? And I was honestly happily surprised with how well these packs work together. It feels like kind of a rare thing in The Sims 4, but the toilet is also from Realm of Magic, and then the two side tables next to the sinks are from Vintage Glamour. And then the little holder with the towels is from Get Famous. And on top of that, this accent table from Life and Death actually works quite well with these borders that are placed all the way around at the bottom, which are from high school years. So magically, somehow everything came together. Now we are working on the last part that you're seeing in this video, and that's because this is the last part that is inspired by footage we actually see in the film. So when Chihiro runs from the bathroom, she basically breaks into the bathroom and then runs to Yubaba's office, and she seems to be running through a set of hallways, and this is that hallway. So there are other parts which I have of course furnished and decorated that you're not going to see in this video. I also finished up everything outside, all of the final touches, did all of the custom roofs. I think they took about an hour, which was kind of crazy, but the video was just getting way too long to keep including more and more footage. So I found that this was the most important footage, and then the rest you're just going to see kind of as beauty shots. This is such a huge build that I think I'm going to do a separate video doing a full tour, because there's just so many things that I want to talk about, that I want to show you in detail, but this video is getting way too long, and I also know that that is not for everyone. So for those of you who are just here to enjoy a video of me building and then seeing the final results, here you are. And with that, I wish you a lovely day. I hope to see you next time, and bye!